Hello, my name is Charles Goldfarb, and I'm joined by my co-host Alexander Aleem for the AOA podcast Lessons in Orthopedic Leadership. I'm pleased to share that our listenership continues to grow, and we will continue to tackle topics of interest to all leaders, but especially those in orthopedic surgery. Today, we have a special guest that I'd like to introduce. Cheryl Blanchard is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Anika Therapeutics. Dr. Blanchard joined the board of directors of Anika in August of 2018. Prior to her work with Anika, she served as the president and chief executive officer of Microchips Biotech, a venture-backed biotechnology company working on regenerative medicine and drug delivery products. Prior to that, Dr. Blanchard was a principal at Blanchard Consulting, and she also, from 2000 to 2012, served in various different roles with Zimmer Incorporated, which is now Zimmer Biomet. So we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Blanchard to the podcast and look forward to learning more about her path, about Anika Therapeutics, and really about what's exciting in the world of orthopedic and biotechnology. So I'll turn it over to Alexander now.
Dr. Blanchard, it's a pleasure to have you, and we're really excited. We were kind of chatting in our pre-show. Anika Therapeutics may not be a company that kind of comes to the forefront for a lot of orthopedic surgeons, but probably is a company that we may be fairly familiar with some of your products. So maybe give us briefly quick history on Anika and sort of some of the highlights about what y'all have for us orthopedic surgeons.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And by the way, thank you all for hosting this podcast and for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. Life at Anika has been very exciting for the last couple of years. I think we were joking earlier. I think Anika is one of the best kept secrets in orthopedics, which is not what a company wants to be. So I'm happy to give a brief description of what we're up to. Actually, everybody knows Anika. They just didn't know they knew Anika. We're the manufacturers, the developers and manufacturers of Orthovisc and Monovisc. So that product is sold by your friendly J&J MyTech rep today. So you just don't see us as the face of that product, but that's really where our roots in innovation, in orthopedics, and in joint preservation came from. Anika is a company that's about 30 years old. We're a public company, and a couple of years ago, the board of directors decided that we had a real opportunity based on, our real platform of exciting products with Orthovisc, Monovisc. We have a cartilage repair product called Hyalofast that's sold outside the U.S. It's in a clinical trial in the U.S. Single stage cartilage repair product that's very exciting. Another great product that's an injectable called Cingal that we sell outside the U.S. That's a kind of a steroid HA combo product. Don't sell it in the U.S. yet. We had all of that basis, kind of early intervention, regenerative therapies, and we decided to launch off from that. And as a business, deploy our cash to pivot the company to really be direct to surgeons, because we kind of thought that was missing. And I think it gives you a much better opportunity to shorten your innovation cycle, to really have a better understanding of what the true unmet clinical needs are, what the true unmet needs of the market and the whole healthcare ecosystem are. And so we did that pivot. We have great timing right before COVID hit. And that pivot really consisted of us completing two acquisitions. We acquired a small sports medicine company called Parcus Medical that has kind of a broad range of sports medicine, soft tissue devices and implants. And we also acquired a company called Arthrosurface that I do think has some brand name recognition amongst the surgeon community, that really is about minimally invasive bone preserving, kind of the smaller implants, more focused on the extremities. And we did those acquisitions and then, put, I think, kind of a dream team of orthopedic executives together to really develop a lot of great products in that joint preservation space, with a mission to really get people back to active living, partner with clinicians to come up with the next generation of great products that are really focused in joint preservation. And, I think, to me, that's something that we're doing that's a little bit special. I spent a big chunk of my career at Zimmer and have been affiliated with other orthopedic companies, either as a board member or kind of in the startup space. And I'm really motivated by getting people back to active living. I've had orthopedic surgery, pretty much everybody I know has, and I just see the difference that it makes in their lives. And being able to continue to innovate in that early intervention joint preservation space is really what we're motivated by. And that's what we're up to.
I love that. I want to build on a couple of things you said. First, all orthopedic surgeons recognize we are trying to keep our patients active and trying to come up with minimally invasive ways to do that. So certainly your mission resonates with our goals. And I guess we're going to tackle your career because I think there's a lot we can all learn. But first, I'd like to just hear a little bit more about the thought processes behind the acquisitions. So prior to acquiring these two companies, you guys were a therapeutics company with injectables and, as you said, joint preservation type work. Now, these are different companies. These are implant companies and, as you said, sports medicine products. So first, I think from a business standpoint, how did you make a decision to head in a slightly different direction? And just talk us through that, because I believe our audience will be very interested.
Well, it's a great question, and it's something that the then management team, at the time I was actually a board member and then came in as the CEO a couple of years later. I will tell you, from a pure business perspective, and especially as a public company, the public markets are looking for your story about how you're going to build value for the investors. And I think the whole healthcare ecosystem has to find a way to make money and build value, right? It's not just the companies that make the stuff, but everybody's got to find a way to win in the ecosystem. And, I have a CFO that likes to say, no margin, no mission. We're all very mission driven, but it's no different from the surgeons. Your healthcare facilities have to make money, the hospitals, the ASCs, the insurance companies, and it has to be affordable in a way that patients can seek the care and get the care that they need and rehabilitate to feel better. So from a business perspective, Anika had a really good run with the HA-based technologies and primarily Orthovisc and Monovisc. And we had an opportunity, because we had a good run. We had a strong balance sheet to deploy the cash that we had to continue to build value for our shareholders, and to be able to do it in a way that was still in line with that joint preservation mission that the company had, and to do it in a way that really leveraged that platform technology that we had in hyaluronic acid. And the way we saw doing that was a number of different things. One, it was to have direct access to the surgeons, as I mentioned earlier, because we think that's the way you get closest to how to innovate. How to best innovate is to be closest to the clinic, be closest to what's going on with them, what they see their needs for their patients are, and to really make sure that you're focused on unmet need driven innovation. And the only way you do that is to have a sales force and to sell your products directly to clinicians. So that was part of it. And by buying those two companies, we also greenfielded our way to a sales force. So overnight, we gave ourselves a sales force. We also, as a company, had products in the pipeline, a regenerative patch to treat rotator cuff repair, a regenerative bone void filler that treats insufficiency fractures. And we just had a really exciting label that we got as augmentation to suture anchored fixation. So we were going in the direction of the call point of the early intervention surgeon, the sports med surgeon, the extremities surgeon, the surgeons that really, fit into that bucket of focusing on joint preservation. And so, for example, buying a sports medicine company, a lot of our regenerative products are going to be sold to that sports med call point. Those procedures are also going to use suture anchor type technologies. So it's really thinking about providing the whole solution in that early intervention space to the clinician and doing it in a way that builds value for our shareholders. And so that's really what led us to that strategy.
It's interesting because I think, a lot of the companies that are trying to incorporate biologics kind of started with implants, and now they're going that way. You kind of went the other way. Other challenges that, come up with that, because you're running into, and you worked for one of those companies, those bigger companies that we all know and we all see and have that kind of direct contact with us. What have been some of those challenges as you're trying to maybe change a little bit of the portfolio of what your company has to offer, and then kind of keeping within that mission, as you said?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll tell you, I've worked for little companies, medium companies, and big companies, and they've all got their bag of tricks when it comes to challenges. When I was at Zimmer, great company, loved my time there, learned so much. I played kind of a dual role as chief scientific officer, and then started up that regenerative medicine business that they have now, and then ran it. And in that environment, the challenge was trying to get sort of attention and funding from the hip and knee business, because it's so big, it can take up all the resources. That one of the advantages of being at a company like Anika, where that is our strategy, is, we have to be focused on making the right choices in that joint preservation space, and making sure that we're developing the right products, and that we have a way to get them in surgeons' hands. And I would say one of the challenges of the pivot that we've been going through has been the fact that we are now a direct commercial entity in the United States. And, we acquired two small companies that had sales forces, but they were capital strapped, they were cash strapped, they were smaller companies. And so while we had the capital to deploy, none of the three companies really had kind of mature sales force, mature commercial systems, mature commercial operation systems, inventory management, all of those things. And so we've really had to step back and implement those things, and make sure we're doing it in a way that is best in class, and that our surgeon customers are going to feel like they have a really professional organization presented to them. Not because we all know it's not just about the products, but it's also about your process and your sales rep, and your ability to have an agreement with a hospital system, and negotiate pricing, and all of those things. Being able to get from the products to a mature system on the commercial side was probably the biggest challenge that we've been working through over the last couple of years, and during COVID.
Yeah, I'm sure COVID just complicated all of this.
It did.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I am curious if challenges such as the one I'm about to mention have risen to your level. We see the big companies trying to establish contracts with the big health systems, and provide special pricing, and sort of direct alignment with a health system. And while I don't know if their goal is to keep the smaller companies out, it certainly seems like that's a probably a secondary goal, at least if not a primary goal. Has that been a challenge for you to find space with the bigger health systems for your implant products?
It's a great question, and I would say so far not yet. Although, I could fully see that coming, but I think we have a lot of runway to go before we start bumping up against that. And I think one of the reasons is because we are focused on the joint preservation space, and we have some special solutions that not everybody has, that I think that's something that the surgeons pay attention to, and then therefore their healthcare systems pay attention to. Part of our strategy in doing this pivot was to have a focus, though, on the ASC setting, and to make sure that we were delivering a value proposition that worked in that healthcare setting, which is different. It's very different than the hospital setting. And I know the big companies are talking about focusing on the ASC, because that's where so many procedures have gone during COVID. This was actually a strategy we had before COVID hit. And, in the joint preservation space, most of those procedures get done if the patient's medically able, and, all the other stars align that we know about. That's where those procedures largely are, and are largely going if they're not already there. And so our strategy from day one has been to make sure that we can structure ourselves so that we can get those contracts that were attractive enough to be able to get them, that our pricing works, that our delivery works, that our ability to supply enough of the products that they need in that ASC setting is there. those are sort of the things that people are focused on, and we're getting a lot of attention because of it.
Kind of to that point, I think what's kind of the on the horizon the next couple of years that's really exciting within the orthopedic marketplace. I think, a lot of us all kind of realize that biologics and, as you mentioned, joint preservation, things we can do to restore rather than replace is probably going to be there. But what are some of the other market kind of trends that you're excited about? I think the ASC pivot driven by COVID, as you've mentioned, a lot of companies are really looking at that. How can they integrate the entire ASC? What are some of the things that you've seen, as exciting new trends within the orthopedic marketplace?
Yeah, well, you listed a whole bunch of them, and so that's great, because I think they're real, and it is something that I think the industry needs to be focused on, because it's not just the it's not just the surgeons and the payers and the sort of healthcare administrators that are driving those trends, but it's the patients too. The patients want to stay active longer. They want to not have to have a total joint. They'd like to avoid that for as long as possible. They'd like to preserve their native tissue for as long as possible. Most patients don't want to go to a hospital if they can avoid it. Hospitals are where sick people go, and most of these patients, they don't feel sick. They don't want to go to a hospital, and that really has been accelerated because of COVID, because there are sick people that they don't want to be near in a hospital for that reason. So I think a lot of those dynamics are definitely making movement in terms of industry trends. But let me talk for a minute about the healthcare ecosystem, because I think a lot of the other trends that we're going to see are driven by the pressures that the whole ecosystem feels. And that is about delivering value in a way that the healthcare system can support and afford going forward, in a way that the patients are going to accept and going to access, because they don't, a lot of these procedures are elective. They can wait an awful long time until it doesn't become elective. And that's not health. That's not good for their health. It's not good for their wellness. That's also not good for the payers, because then they end up costing more to them further down the line. So I think, being able to deliver a set of solutions in a way that works in the direction that the healthcare system is going toward the ASCs, in a way that brings value to the whole healthcare supply chain, with solutions that are meaningful, that work, that have the right data behind them, and that are, obviously safe and effective is the requirement the FDA has. But I think we need to be more than safe and effective now. I think we need to be evidence-based. I think we need to be cost effective, and I think that the patients have to want to do it.
Thank you. Oh, well, I think every single orthopedic surgeon listening will agree with your overview, and we look forward to seeing what's coming down the pipeline. There are many of us who are involved with different industry partners, and we do see it that way, that you certainly are a partner, and providing innovative options for our patients is really very exciting. I'd like to pivot a little bit. We in orthopedics have many challenges, but one is creating opportunities for those underrepresented in medicine, whether that's based on race, or certainly there are far too few women in our field. And that has been a priority for all of us. And I think thankfully it's become, the whispers have become, murmurs have become much more than that. And so I want to talk a little bit, if you're okay with it, about your career, because I think your success really is exciting for all of us. And so briefly, you received your MS and PhD in material science and engineering from the University of Texas at Austin, and your BS in ceramic engineering from Alfred University. And you took those that incredible background and went into the industry world and have clearly marched up the ranks. So give us a little sense about kind of how you decided to pursue a leadership role, and how you've achieved all that you have done so today.
Well, thank you. You flatter me, and I'm happy to talk about it. And I guess from my perspective, being in orthopedics has been an interesting career, and you're absolutely right. It's not just male dominated on the clinical side, but it has been historically on the corporate side too. So it's both. And also going through getting 3 engineering degrees, there wasn't a lot of diversity in that path either. So I don't know. My mom likes to joke with me that I never do anything the easy way. So I just always did what I was interested in doing. And I think that's what motivated me. And I really didn't think about the rest of it, because I was fortunate to have access to education, which I think was the first important step. And I think, people have that access in this country, and that especially in engineering, because when you go to grad school, they'll pay you to go. So, it's that actually I wanted to go to medical school, decided I couldn't afford it, but they were going to pay me to go to grad school in engineering. So that's what made me go to grad school. But I found my way back to medicine in a different way. And I actually think it was the right way for me to do it, because my very first job was a company called Southwest Research Institute in San Antonio, Texas. And it's a kind of a cross between a university and a business. And you actually kind of eat what you kill there, and you build your own, you build your own business there. If you can go get the funding for it, you build a group. And what I learned was, as much as I loved the science and the engineering, I loved the business part just as much. And I also realized, if I really wanted to do things in a therapeutic space, that it's companies that have therapeutics. And being at a university could be cool, and I could do a lot of basic science, but I was really drawn to the ability to actually get devices and drugs and therapies into people. And it's companies that do that. So I found my way to, after I actually founded a couple of companies when I was at Southwest Research Institute. And then I really thought, I need to go to a big company and just see how it's done from start to finish, because I viewed it as a learning opportunity. I wanted to go be part of something big and be part of a company that was really doing it. And when I got the call from Zimmer, it just was like the angels sang to me, because I could still be focused on the technology and the clinical unmet need aspects and coming up with these therapies, but also learn how it's done. The research, the development, the quality system piece, the regulatory piece, the global regulatory environment is so complex, and really learning that, understanding how clinical studies work. And I've been able to, had that access at that company to run opportunity, really to run all those organizations, and then really understand how that builds a business, how that builds value for shareholders, and then how all that stuff gets funded. So you go right back to the beginning and do it all again. And that's what really motivated me. The most exciting thing was to, the very first product I saw get put into a person, and that excitement never goes away. It happened with Anika this week. We had a new product launch, we had first surgeries, and I was like a 12-year-old at the dinner table with my kids that night. So I've just been really fortunate, I think, to be at companies that gave me those learning opportunities that have really allowed me to continue to give back to the orthopedic community in a business role.
Such a great story, and it's so cool to hear kind of that, because I think, I had an engineering degree as well, and I don't think my goal when I got my engineering degree was to be CEO of a multinational orthopedics company. So
mine either, by the way.
Who
knew
it's
back
amazing
then?
to see that. Yeah, right. I think one of the things, Chuck and I have talked to a lot of different leaders across the space, and now that there's all these more formal leadership things and leadership training, but it seems like a lot of this honestly becomes a little bit of luck, obviously a lot of hard work and drive, but then a lot of experiential learning. Like you
Yes.
can take all the coursework and you can do all the kind of MBAs and things like that you want, but if you don't take those opportunities, you don't kind of get that. Can you speak a little bit about kind of how you would advise somebody kind of graduating, a young person that's kind of looking for the same thing? I think a lot of our young trainees are kind of afraid to jump into this space because they think they need formal business training, or they think they need formal leadership course in order before they can take this on. How would you advise somebody that's kind of trying to tackle that and try to enter that space?
Yeah. I mentor a lot of people. I never say no to somebody asking me to do that because I feel like it's my obligation to pay it forward. And I feel like I greatly benefited from people giving me those opportunities and giving me that feedback. And I think the number one thing for someone to develop themselves is the experiential elements. Go do as many things as you can do. I will have people ask me, well, how did you know to do this, this, and this, and this, and that was going to lead you to become a CEO? I didn't. Who knows where it's going to take you? And don't try to know where it's going to take you, but go do everything you can do. Don't say no to anything, because each of those experiences will build. And then at some point, you're going to look at something, or somebody's going to look at you and say, hey, you did all those things. Now go do this. And then it just continues to build and the opportunities continue to broaden. I would also tell people, though, to jump in. I had a great piece of feedback given to me years ago when I first went to Zimmer, and I had the great fortune of working for the then CEO, Ray Elliott, who's really the CEO that gave me a lot of these experiential learning opportunities and, to get paid for it, which was even better. He put me in charge of a big mergers and acquisitions project. And at the time I was like a vice president of research and development and clinical affairs, I think, something like that. And I remember feeling immediately terrified and looking at him saying, I feel like I should go get an MBA first because I don't really know how to do this. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, you don't need to do that. You'll have one by the time you get to the end of this project. And he was right. And it was a lot of work and a lot of sleepless nights and a little bit of pain and some mistakes along the way. But that's how you get there. And, you just sort of have to be a little fearless and dive in and give it a try. Ask a lot of questions and don't be afraid to fail and learn from it.
I love that. I was given a similar opportunity by our previous chairman to run a large ambulatory surgery center, and he kind of had the same advice. And not everyone gets those opportunities, but when you do, and when you have the support behind you and strong mentors, it really is an amazing thing. So
I agree.
Yeah. So I just want to say thank you. I think your story and the story of Anika Therapeutics is really interesting. This podcast will resonate with many of our listeners, and I know that Alexander and I will keep our eyes open to look for what's new and what's coming down the pipeline from you guys. So thank you, congratulations, and it's really been fun.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to seeing you guys all hopefully in person at meetings in the future. Hopefully we're getting back to that.
Yes, absolutely. We'll definitely stop by the booth and say hi at the next meeting for sure. Thanks, Dr.
Awesome.
Blanchard.
Thank you.